Hello and welcome to this final edition, three-part series on the media in Guyana. We have been looking at the media, its role in this democratic society, and the discussion was premised on within the context of the recent report released by Reporters Without Border. That's a Paris-based organization that assesses the media across the world. Their most recent report dropped Guyana 11 places on the Media Freedom Index, and the reason they gave was that at the time of assessment, November of last year, Guyana still had a monopoly on radio. That has been a matter of debate since that report came out as to whether it's fair to just use radio monopoly as the basis on which to drop a country's ranking 11 places, while Jamaica has been elevated to first place ahead of developed countries. And we have been looking at that report. We have been looking at the media over the past 2 weeks. I'm joined again in the studio of NCN on this edition by CEO of NCN, Michael Gordon, Gary Eleazar of GT Online News. I also have with me Namila Baynes-Rowe, who is a veteran journalist at large, and of course the information liaison to the President, Mr. Kwame Mc Coy. Thank you very much for joining us for this final discussion on the media landscape in Guyana, particularly in the context of this drop 11 places on the Press Freedom Index, as indicated by Reporters Without Border. When we started the discussion, we tried to analyze that report. We followed up that discussion by looking at ethics and the professional conduct of the Guyanese media. And today we want to conclude that discussion by maybe looking a little more on the ethical matters and looking at where we go from here in terms of best practices that ought to be the beacon that guides the Guyanese media, like we have in most other countries where there are best practices, where there are regulatory bodies or code that guides the media, which to a large extent is absent in Guyana. We've just had the broadcast authority, but nothing to regulate the press. Michael, last time we were here, you made a very strong argument that according to the UNESCO convention that guides the media, that no one should restrict the media and the freedoms that should obtain in the media. Not a government, not a proprietor, not the private sector. No one, absolutely no one. I'm sure you have been able to re-examine that position, and I'm sure you will tell me today that you're sticking by your convictions that in Guyana, we do not have necessarily restrictions being meted out by the government, as would be claimed by other sections of the media.
What you've found, Dario, and I've done some research subsequent to our last discussion, is the fact that especially in many developing countries and many developing democracies, you find very many instances or claims of government interference in the freedom of the press and the freedom of the media to operate within those emerging democracies and maturing democracies. And as I've said before, and I would like to reiterate for the sake of emphasis, some tend to take or to turn a blind eye to other forms of interference in freedom of the press. And there are many forms. There is the perception. There may be even incidents of press intimidating press, and that could be a very existing arrangement here in the context of the Guyana media. It is no secret that NCN, for example, operates within the ambit of the state media, under the umbrella of the state media. And in that context, there could be no doubt that NCN has a particular role, a particular mandate as the national broadcaster, which is not entirely distinct and different from what should obtain for the private media. However, what you find in many cases is that there is some perception of government interference in the content of the NCNs of this world, with very little or no recognition, and I continue to emphasize this point, with very little or no recognition that on the other side of the spectrum you find other forms of interference and intimidation. So I know you're the moderator here, but I'm particularly I'm hoping that we could delve a little into this discussion from that perspective as it relates to the freedoms of the press. And for the sake of emphasis, the freedoms to which we refer. I always say they're not absolute.
Gary and Namila, you're joining us for the first time. Why don't you weigh in now on your take on this drop in ranking by Reporters Without Border, your take on the media, the state of the Guyanese media, how it operates now, with particular emphasis on ethics and professional conduct.
What I would want to say, firstly, I do believe that there is some justification for that drop. You would have mentioned particularly the radio license, but over the years, while we have issued some radio licenses, we would have not been doing that over the years. For very many years, the government controlled basically the airwaves. On the issue of regulating the press, I would support your opening argument that in reference to what Michael said, there shouldn't be regulation for the press. Let the readers, let the reading public
There shouldn't
review it.
be regulation.
No, there shouldn't be that kind of formal.
Not institutionalized.
Not institutionalized.
So you're clearly in favor of self-regulation as posited by Adam
Self-censorship,
and
yes.
Annan.
Yes.
Did Michael say that? I didn't.
No, I
didn't get that
didn't
Michael
say.
said
No, I
that,
didn't say.
actually.
I think Gary might have misunderstood me.
My apologies.
I will beg to differ as we go on, because I'm strongly of the opinion that self-regulation is not working in Guyana. It is not working.
Dario, forgive me for not observing your protocol or order, but I'm strongly of the position too that it has not been working. But I'm also an advocate for self-regulation. But my advocacy for self-regulation should not be taken in isolation. There must be overriding factors, legislative especially, as it relates to the oversight of the media. For example, there's no criminal defamation in Guyana, but public officials and officials, whether it's on the government side, the opposition side, they utilize civil libel suits to settle criticisms. And NCN perhaps right now is subject to one of those civil libel suits.
But certainly, were we to have an institutionalized body that regulates the media, then it negates the fact, the need for us to clog up the court system with libel suits all the time. It could be arbitrated by a body that recognizes the due responsibility of the media and can be able to manage its existence. Namila, you were telling us before we started that the media here in Guyana, to your mind, is operating quite freely.
No. I tend to disagree with what you are saying, that the media should be regulated. For one, let's go back to why the discussion started in the first place, that Guyana was dropped 11 places. I would tend to agree with some of that because, like Gary said, for years the radio was monopolized by the government. Was to say, it's we now have license being issued, but we don't hear those other channels, or I'm not aware. I know that their licenses have been issued, but I have not heard them.
I believe one is operational.
Okay.
Two.
Okay. Two, there was a regulatory body. As a practicing journalist, I myself came under some censorship from the Advisory Committee on Broadcast, right? Without them looking at the entire program that they had looked at and cited some, I would say, 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 some, I would infraction on my part as the editor. But when I responded and I sent the entire program, then, you know, they were probably satisfied. I have two issues with that. The people who are said to be the oversight body, some of them they don't know anything of the industry. They're political appointees, and I have an issue with that. Even if you have two political appointees, have somebody on that board who is au fait with the industry, who is conversant with all the issues in the industry. Because with the super information highway, emerging technology, information is ubiquitous. You cannot control the information the way you used to. Because everybody...
And Gary will tell us about that with his GT Online News.
Everybody has an iPhone, a smartphone. They're online on their phones. They don't have to be in a room in front of a desktop. They're on the go, and they can actually get information on the go. That apart, let us look at the medium radio. Radio is immediate, crosses the barriers of illiteracy. It is cheap, and in Guyana, for the radio, it would meet most of the population that the bandwidth would accommodate. Given that, I don't think that the government should have had the monopoly on radio, so I would say that rating is justified.
And
because
and I don't want the viewers to think that Kwame has decidedly appeared to be quiet today. They have become
shifting
they
seats
become
closer
accustomed
to the door.
to his very active posture on this panel. I'm sure you would want to come in here now to talk about how long that monopoly existed.
That monopoly, and we've been through this before in the previous programs about what the monopoly represented at a particular period in our history. That's no longer so. There are about 11 new radio licenses. There are 2 stations in operation, 89.5, 89.1. There are others that are preparing and will very soon, sooner than we think, will be in operation. So definitely so. But I think both Gary and Namila missed the context, and more so the report from Reporters Without Borders to the period they were looking at. They were looking at a specific period. They weren't looking at 20 years ago. They were looking at a period in 2012 up to November of last year. And at that time, my argument has always been that licenses for new radio stations have been given out long before November 2012, even if they were not necessarily in operation. So you had very well the evidence and demonstration of the government's commitment and willingness to remove this monopoly that we spoke about. And we have gone through the history before about as to how we ended up with a monopoly on radio. We talked about the bipartisan committee on between the former leader of the opposition, Desmond Hoyt, and then President Jack Dio. We talked about, and then incidentally, Namila, I always miss your name, sorry. Mrs. Rowe spoke about the ACB as having political appointees and people who may not be au fait and conversant with the entire industry, which I beg to differ. Because you had people like Ron Sanders, Ron Case and others.
He was not there when I was there.
Who are very, these are no wishy-washy people. You have people, Pat Dial and others. Carlton James. We all know him. Very eminent broadcaster in our society. And I'm saying that we, at that time, that was seen as the solution to reaching an end result.
But it was a temporary
and
solution.
it was a temporary solution while we were looking as well at other measures to improve the industry. So that statement doesn't properly reflect. It appears as though the government just take a few people and put them on you know.
But Kwame,
money.
what were
But
the
at the
lessons?
time
What
I
were
was
the
the
lessons
editor.
from that
At the time I was the editor. Let me
advisory
just get in
body?
here. At the
The
time I was the
lessons, I think the
editor.
question is directed to me. The lessons
One
from that
second,
time,
Namila.
the lessons from that time was really, and we've seen some attempt at improvement, because the advisory committee in broadcasting, though it had its weaknesses, we have seen the group of people there were able to bring some semblance of order, while we could say that there were still infractions being committed, etc. But they attempted to do something about it. And I think the mere presence of having them there, people were very careful as to how their broadcast went, etc. So basically, on a baseline level, I would say that it attempted to do something. It did work to some extent, needed a lot more improvement. But I believe that overall, as we look to the future and we look at today, what exists in the media in particularly, and I think that is what this discussion surrounds, we need to have some strong kind of regulatory body. And for me, Mrs. Rose spoke about this very ACB having to summon her and so forth. And at the end of the day, she was able to give an explanation and they were satisfied, etc. So it just shows that it could work.
Namila, tell us some more about your experience.
Okay.
Did you feel at all...
Before I go there, at the time I was the editor of First Look News, there was no Pat Deal, there was no Ron Case, there was no Carlton James. There was no Carlton James. One, I was cited for an infraction without whomever
First Look is weird.
was HBTV Channel 9.
Okay.
Whomever was looking at that program, First Look is a magazine program with a newscast. They did not cite the newscast. They cited a book review, Dr. Keynes Gibson book review. And they omitted parts of the sentences to say that Dr. Keynes Gibson said X, Y, and Z. But when I took a copy of the entire program to show that it was a book review, it wasn't me allowing Dr. Gibson to express, it was a book review on a book that was published, that was in the public sphere. And first, the objectives of that particular program was to inform and educate people on issues that impact their lives. And that was an issue that was in the public arena. I think Freddie Kisson had written about it. The Chronicle had articles about it. There was a lot of going on about it.
Well, this was a very controversial book.
No,
and
I had Dr. Keynes Gibson, it was a book review, television book review. And she also posited the other side of the book. The persons who viewed that program failed to look at the other side of the coin that Dr. Gibson had posited.
But in its
but
general
did you say
rule,
eventually they were satisfied with your explanation?
I did not have to give an explanation. I gave them the program.
Yeah, but if you're saying, but listen,
I did not have to
yes,
give an
but
explanation.
yes, but listen, but when
They
a
failed to
case,
properly look
when a
at
charge is being made of an individual or some offense that somebody perceived to have made, it is on the basis of a charge. The facts are presented before the tribunal or the court, and it is there the determination is made. And as far as you're saying, that procedure was utilized and exhausted. And I think that that is very commendable of this body to have done that. So I think that we are more or less giving,
that is why I
favor.
wanted
They
now to
asked
follow up
for
to
a
the question,
response.
Namelia,
But
that
good.
based on
It's
your
natural
experience
process.
with the function of the body at that time, whether they erred in citing you or not, that's debatable. But given their functions at the time and the impact they were able to have on the media landscape, because certainly some order, some sense of order and professional responsibility obtained. It is widely believed now that we have a Wild West situation with regards to the media. That is debatable too. So within that context, to what extent do you believe the media needs to be regulated, and in what form?
I do not believe the media needs to be regulated.
So,
and I will hold fast to
expound
that.
on that. Hold on. Expound on that, mate. Why would you?
I believe in self-regulation. For example,
But it's not
Define
working.
self-regulation, because last week, Anand Prasad of the Stabrook News also favored self-regulation, and the type of self-regulation he was talking about was Tabrook News regulating itself, not the media fraternity regulating itself, but each media entity regulating themselves. What are you talking about?
You know what? I'm sorry that Mr. Washington is not here from the Guyana Media Proprietors Association, because
He was invited twice, by the way. We should let our viewers know that. He was invited twice, and from the information I have, and he has never turned up to this program.
But I think we're missing a bigger point here.
I will-
The ACB did not achieve its objective.
at all,
At all. And
at
we're-
all,
In
at
that
all.
environment, it didn't work. We're the media landscape now is even more expanded.
Okay,
Because it
there-
didn't have
there-
any
there-
legislation.
there are 3 points I
Remember,
want
this
to bring
body
to the
wasn't
fore.
operating with the
Dario.
legislation.
Okay, so hold
that
on.
was part of its weaknesses.
Hold
It
on,
had
but
no
let me get your
legislation to operate.
perspective.
It was
Do
basically
you subscribe to the
political-
argument in some quarters now that we now have a Wild West situation with regards to the media?
Hold on, Dario.
Yes,
Let me-
yes, we do. But
in a democracy.
each media house will feel the price for themselves for what they're doing.
Yeah,
The readership, the viewers, they
Yeah, but
But
Gary,
at
end
the
of the day,
detriment
at
of
the
of
end
the
of the
public
day,
interest.
to the detriment of our democratic society.
But
Who
isn't that
determines
what
the public
democracy is?
interest?
And the
That's
public-
democracy.
You-
Who
that's not
determines
No,
what
but
is right?
the public
Are you-
interest we all serve. The bottom line, we get into this business of media because we serve the public interest. We have to inform and to educate people. And if we misinform and educate,
You must be
educate
held
them,
accountable.
we are down the road, what we are doing, we are ending up with a society of people that will not know the facts, will never know the truth, will remain ignorant in some instances, and that is the problem.
Because
we
I
have
would,
to set
I
a
would
standard.
rather, I would rather suggest that if it is that we want to allow self-regulation to work, and according to what Gary is saying, let the people decide. It's a democratic society. The people will decide to what extent they treat with a media house based on their reportage.
let me address
then
that first.
then you're talking about anarchy.
Let me address that first, Dario. Let me address that
Why-
first.
why-
What-
The
what-
potential for anarchy.
The potential is there, and with a regulatory body, the potential
but-
for censorship is there, as in
That,
for
that
example,
argument
but the
is a
potential-
valid
but
argument as well.
Gary,
So then where's
just
the balance?
like every
Michael
other-
needs to come in now. He has been wanting to make a point for the longest while.
There's some fundamental things that I need to say. One of which is whenever we have this discussion, the entire discussion is skewed and derailed. And whenever we have discussions about censorship and media, and this what's happening here now is just a microcosm of what happens in the wider media. We seem to home in on the broadcast industry, and it is not, the broadcast industry is not necessarily the
entire
only
media.
transgressors of what should constitute a free and fair media, and it's not a representation of the entire media. That's the first thing I want to make. If Gary and Namila are going to sit here today and they're going to say to me that Guyana has found itself in October, November of 2012 in a worse position than it was in October of 2011, notwithstanding the allocation of radio frequencies in 2012. It therefore means I question their judgment just as much I question the judgment. Permit me to finish, please. Just as much as I question the judgment of the Reporters Without Borders report. The reason why I'm saying that, you're trying to say not having allocated frequencies or granted licenses in 2011 is a better position after having done that in 2012. That's what the report is saying, and I challenge them to refute that. Secondly,
Gordon, tell us what the criteria was for any of those
the
licenses
criteria
that were-
is not the issue.
That's a
we-
different
no, no,
matter.
we keep hearing
That's
that.
a different
No,
matter.
no, no, no,
First
we
of
keep
all,
hearing that.
first of all, the
Issue.
criteria is
Issue.
known.
Gary,
No,
It
no,
was
no, the
publicly, it was publicly said, and the criteria is known by very journalists here too in this very room who probed the matter. That the criteria looked for the radio licenses to be issued. You had to have a business plan. It was based also on reputation as an applicant an individual or company applying, and there were some other things inherent
As a
in those
person in
criteria.
the know-how.
At the end, no, but at the end of the day, don't know-how is not part of it.
But it also said the licenses were not transferable.
I am saying, there's no issue of transferability here. I am saying, at the end of the day, what we need to know, that we must not try to cloud things. We are not talking about how, and I've said the last time, that we could argue every day.
I've made my second
We could argue every day about who got the license and whether they're fit or not fit. Just as if we give the 50 more people, the same argument will exist because it's based subjective and for some people, etc., not look, and willful ignorance, everything. But all I'm saying is that licenses were given. And the basis of our discussion is on that report from Reporters Without Border, that we dropped 11 places because no license. They never said that license of this nature or license to X, Y, and Z. They said no license were given and the monopoly remained on radio. And that's the crux of the argument. We must not mix up our subjects.
Back to my second
Which
point.
would have been a flawed report.
Which is back to my second point. Back to my second point. I spoke initially, I touched initially on the fact that these discussions seem to be derailed. Sometimes I get the impression it's deliberate. And it home in specifically on the broadcast industry, and it doesn't cover the entire media spectrum. And the reason why I'm saying this is because there seems to be a favorite beating drum as it relates to monopoly, monopoly, government, monopoly, government, monopoly. And this is sung from one particular corner in the room, if I could put it metaphorically. This song is sung from one corner in the room. My point is that incidents of the most rabid attempts and attacks on individuals, organizations, and groups come from within the print industry, and it is the so-called bastions of media advocacy and media rights who commit these infringements.
Including the Guyana Chronicle.
We have said, I have moderated, I have participated and moderated in programs and debates. One debate I could recall is the NISIL debate, where the editor and the publisher of a newspaper sits or stood and say, well, if you don't provide us with the information, we will be tempted to speculate. And then the editor of another newspaper who sees itself as the bastion of fair play in the context of media freedoms, he says that if we choose to take only opposition activists, we reserve the right to do that.
In fact, he says...
And immediately I said to you, therefore you should reserve the right to defend the position of any other media house who should take a similar position, whether it's on the seemingly representative on the side, on one side or the other side. But my issue here about regulation, Dario, it comes down to, you made a very important point, whether we regulate ourselves as individuals or media houses, or the media regulate the media. I think it should be both. But even that dispensation, I believe, should not be taken into. It should not be done in isolation. There must be legislative infrastructure to ensure that the media operates within the framework with which the media should operate. Because, as you said, it could be anarchy if there isn't that overriding authority to which the media should be related.
Because, Dario, the other point about that, and what Michael have said, and I wanted to pick up on the point as to how sections of the media tend to treat and to segregate and to say, this section of the media, and particularly the state media. And it is a very dangerous thing, especially as it poses risk. As much as it also poses risk to the journalists that work within the state media sector, who, by the way, are performing a job that is part of the obligation of this government based on the Constitution. Need to provide information to the people, to be accountable what the government is doing. with taxpayers' money, etc.
That is
To the
Gina's
extent.
job. That is
That's
Gina's
the
job.
extent.
That is
Convert
Gina's
the
job. not the
extent-
state.
Not
To the
the state
extent
media.
that the leader of the opposition,
State
to
media
the
is
leader
not
of the
government money.
opposition, to
Taxpayers'
the extent that the
Gina
leader of
is
the
not a
opposition
broadcaster.
just
Taxpayers'
recently,
money.
Gina is not a
recently the
broadcaster.
leader of the opposition in extending Christmas greetings to the media people distinctly said, except NCN, except the state media. I mean, extending Christmas greetings. Now, we are known in this country for certain things. We have our politics. It is as competitive and everything else. But whenever there are things like funeral, seasonal events, Christmas, etc., we are known to be supportive of each other, to extend courtesies, etc. And when you go to that extent, because many of the people that exist within the private media, I know, are also on the opposition's payroll. And they carry extensively an opposition line because that's part of their role. And you just look at what takes place in the media. You look at the Kaieteur news for the last few days on this issue of the Marriott Hotel. Another wave of attack on a project by the opposition, a very anti-national position, racist position in terms of the Chinese, but they move in a direction.
That is what a free
They
press
move
is.
in a direction. Yeah, a free press is also free to give the opposition the dominance and to ignore the government's position as frequent as they ought to.
Which government?
Gary.
Right?
Which government
Gary.
position?
Gary, could you elaborate
I
on the
wouldn't be
point you were
talking about
making
the government
just
of the
now as
United
to the
States. I'm in
role of
Guyana.
the state media vis-a-vis private media?
No, the point I was trying to make is that the state media does not mean government media.
Because it's funded by
It's
taxpayers' money.
state affairs.
The
State
state should
includes
be-
opposition.
The opposition.
We should be able to
The
pick up the
public
Chronicle and
and
read
read-
opposition views as well.
But
Gary.
they do.
Exactly.
Gary,
Exactly.
Gary.
The Chronicle has opposition
public-
views.
Permit me to correct you
Don't.
on a point of order.
Don't the Chronicle have opposition views?
I could give
How
you.
often?
I could
Well,
give
well
you.
that's
Gary,
another
I
subject.
could
How
give
often
you.
is a different thing.
I could give you volumes of invites
If you want
that
to
have
do
been
that.
extended to the various opposition parties to participate in programs here in NCN. And to my mind, and it's my opinion to which I'm entitled, and I stand corrected if I'm wrong, but I view some responses as simply red herrings. So
But-
there could
but
be,
Michael.
so Gary, there could be a deliberate and concerted song to sing that we are not given the opportunity to participate in or appear on NCN. And I'm speaking from the NCN perspective.
And how recent you might have done that?
This would have happened just days ago,
Michael,
within the last week.
some of the programs that you invite them on, right? Would it be feasible to say that, okay, something happens in Parliament, the government parliamentarians get on there, they have an hour-long program, they give their views. Would it be fair to say that the opposition is not allowed that time to come and give their views?
Would the government be allowed an
Unedited.
hour-long program on Channel 9?
No, I am not working at Channel 9.
Well,
Kwame.
wherever
Kwame,
you
I
used
am
to,
not working.
or in the private
Kwame,
media.
I'm a
Or
journalist.
I would
in
love,
the
I would
private
love to
media.
answer that.
Kwame,
Because
I
let
am
me
a
say,
journalist
because
by
no,
profession.
no, but you're going back to
Kwame.
this same argument.
Kwame.
You are going back to the
I
same
am a
argument about what is
journalist
good
by
for one is good
profession.
for the other. Hold on.
This is the
To
state
the extent,
media where all the taxpayers'
but
money.
the state media and the private media are no difference. They all serve the public interest. That is bottom
The
line.
state media
The
and
public's
they
interest.
They should.
They should.
They're
They should.
competing.
And at the end of the
Certainly,
day,
certainly.
at the
last-
end of the day, at
last
the
time
end
we
of
were
the day,
here,
they
certainly.
both have to do the same thing, the right things.
They
Right?
are supposed to
And when
educate
we're
last-
talking,
and
so it
educate
is
the
not
public.
it is not the state media.
has the
It is
responsibility to give
just as the
both
private media.
sides.
Just as the
Both
private
sides,
media.
because
Well,
we
Just
had
as the private
Well, we
media.
had an editor
Just
of
as
a
the private
private
media.
paper here the last time who said as a matter of policy, the paper accommodate the views
That's not my
of
opinion.
people from the
That's not,
opposition.
I'm giving you my opinion now. My opinion as a taxpayer.
Namila is speaking to an ideal.
I am speaking.
She's speaking
No,
to
I'm
an
not
ideal.
speaking to an ideal. In a democracy, the information should be from competing media houses. In any democracy, Guyana is a fledgling democracy. I give that. We are not there. We're not a developed country. We are a developing country, and I'm saying to you that let's get back to the radio. Recently on the in the electronic media, that is the internet, there was something circulated that the government has said that the calypsos that are anti-government should be banned. That's radio, right? No, calypso.
But Namila, I'm
no.
disappointed as a seasoned journalist that you will journey into the realm of speculation without first verification.
No, but that's why you're here. I have not
So-
discussed this with you. I'm saying it was circulated. Listen to me carefully, Michael. Listen to me. I said it was circulated on the internet that this was an edict, as it were.
She just said that.
I said it was circulated. I did not say that was my opinion.
You seem
or I
somewhat
believe
convinced.
it.
Okay.
No. That's speculation.
My
on your
apologies.
Which
part.
seems to be the MO of most of the internet-based
No.
news organizations.
No, I am
Gary,
saying
I
this
would
is
like you to
information. This is
speak to that
information
because
that is
certainly
out
there's
there.
no regulation for e-based news organizations.
My
No.
firm belief is that your viewers will judge you. There are
I agree with you.
3 internet sites, news sites that I recognize. Obviously my own, Demerara Waves and iNews. Their content hurts them. iNews in particular. It's free to write whatever it wants, but you will read it for only so long. You as an informed, let's say a smart person, because most people that generally pay attention to the news have some amount of but they will decide after reading something for so long, they will decide that this isn't credible.
I don't
Come
know to
back
what
to
extent
this.
I agree with you
This
because
is-
there's a proclivity for the masses here or anywhere else to adventure themselves towards anything that is very sensational, very tabloid-like.
That's
and
human
maybe
nature.
that's
That's human nature.
That is one of the reasons
That's
why
what
we
I'm saying.
have
You will
why
be
we have
attracted to
some
it.
of the newspapers
Dario, hear me.
gaining the kind of popularity they claim for themselves because they have deliberately formalized the news into tabloid kind of information
Dario.
because that's what people seem to like.
The role of
but
the
then
media,
that has
let's come back to the role of the
where
media,
does
Dario.
professional responsibility and ethics fall in
And
that
that's-
sphere?
Let's
That
come
is
back
the
to the
problem.
role of the media.
That is the
The
biggest
role
problem.
of the media
It's a
serves
feed-
as a
feed
no,
the
no,
need
absence
of-
checks
of those
and balances.
ethics and-
Yeah, let me
Checks
just
and
an answer.
balances, because the government is elected to serve, and any media entity worth its salt, if you can expose, which has happened in the media in Guyana, where there's corruption, shoddy roads. I mean, that didn't have to go. I didn't have to look in the media to see shoddy work. I'm a Guyanese. I live
I don't
here.
have to look in the
I
media to
traverse
see
here.
that there are several people sitting in the National Assembly wasting my money for things that are irrelevant to me.
That is true.
No, that is true.
I don't have to
That
look in
is
the media
true
to
for
see
both
that.
sides of the
However,
divide. That is so true.
you spoke
But-
about no.
but-
Namila
but,
spoke.
Michael, the person
Namila
in
spoke.
Rupununi, the
Gary,
person in Rupununi
Gary,
would need
Namila's
the media for that.
Gary, Namila spoke to the whole notion of government and the media's role to be the watchdog and to ensure that government
Isn't that a
spend
fact?
their resources the way government should spend it.
Yes.
There
That is a
are
fact.
3
Yeah.
arms
Arms
of
of government.
government.
Of course.
Wherein then
The
lies the
Sorry,
need
and the
for the
legislative-
watchdog? For the watchdog.
So why
Who's gonna watch the watchman?
It
Okay.
appears as though, Dario, that
The
there
mi-
is a very,
es-
very, and
especially-
we've noticed the pattern. For the last 3 programs, you've noted the pattern. The private media, and particularly those who may be perceived to be the biggest culprits,
they're fixed with the executive?
in the biggest culprits in creating, in being offensive as media houses, are against any form of regulation. I think that's very clear.
No, I
and as far as
disagree
I'm
with that
concerned,
position. I
as
agree
far
with
as
that
I'm
position.
concerned,
I think we're against
they
state
would,
regulation.
but nobody spoke about state regulation.
No,
That
but
is what-
let me
we spoke
clarify.
about regulation, but
Gary,
not
Gary,
by
I
state.
spoke of
No,
We
legislative
never
regulation.
said by.
At no
we
point
never
of this
said
discussion
that we will
did
have state
anybody
regulation.
Posit
We
the
never
need
said
for
that.
state
So here is
regulation.
where it even starts from
We-
here,
we-
the
we-
misinformation.
Who
Even
enforces
from here.
We
enforces
we
Very
have
easy.
to-
he from
Who
even from
enforces
here.
legislation?
Well, we did say that
We
there's
have
a
positive. That the media can regulate.
It is amazing that both. It is amazing that both of you will sit here.
I agree
It
with
is
you.
Arm
amazing.
of the state.
It is amazing yet fascinating
Let me
that
go back.
both of you here would be listening to this to the discussion, be part of this discussion, and being misinforming yourself and misinforming the nation as to what we're really talking about. It's either you don't have an understanding or it is deliberate.
What are you talking
Because
about?
let me go back.
You calling
at the
misinformation?
end of
Hold
the
on.
day, at the end of the day, nobody here
Misinformation is
spoke.
propaganda.
Nobody here spoke about state regulating
And let me
the
go back.
media.
Let
We
me
never
go
said
back.
that. We never
Let
said
me go
that.
back. Let me
It's
go
an
back
arm
to
of the
what was
state.
posited when we started
It is
this
an arm of the
discussion.
state.
We made a reference to the fact that UNESCO, in its focus in press freedom observances last year, really honed in on the fact that regulation in the media ought to ensure that we avoid the traps of censorship, but it also needs to ensure that there's fraternal understanding and camaraderie with regards to regulation. In other words, the media must regulate itself. And I reference
But you
the
said you didn't agree
Tanzanian
before.
media.
No, I said I
But
agreed.
before you say you don't agree to any
and
form of regulation.
let me finish.
Let's hear the question.
I
Let's hear the
referenced the
question.
Tanzanian media that took up UNESCO's challenge to ensure that the media regulates itself and not allow itself to be dragged into any kind of regulation that may spell of censorship. Because any kind of government regulation raises suspicion about censorship. Tanzania took up the challenge, and I made some reference to it when we started, but I want to go further to highlight some of what they intend to do, or what they have been doing. It says the objective of the Media Council of Tanzania to promote, assist, safeguard, and defend freedom of the media and allied forms of public communication in the United Republic of Tanzania, to oversee that journalists, editors, broadcasters, producers, directors, proprietors, and all those involved in the media industry in Tanzania adhere to the highest professional and ethical standards. And hear this: to receive and conciliate, mediate, and or arbitrate upon complaints from the public amongst the media into say against alleged infringement of the codes of ethics. In other words, this council has arrogated to itself, by consent of the entire media fraternity, the powers to regulate, arbitrate, mediate, conciliate on infringements. And I don't see why, in a fledgling democracy like Guyana, why the notion of regulation needs to be that we allow the readers to judge and the readers to regulate the media.
What we're in essence saying,
It
Dario,
almost seems
I am
like
saying
confounded
government
nonsense to
regulation.
me that we should
Government
argue
regulation.
that the viewers and readers of the media
Government
are the
regulation.
ones who should
Government
regulate the
regulation.
media.
You see, some people come here and they have a fixation about government.
No.
They have this fixation, so that even that it is
We are
necessary
having
because
a discussion here.
and
It's
this is part of the
unnecessary.
discussion.
Okay,
right?
now
Contribution
that
is part of the
now that
discussion.
we've
No.
clarified
So,
the type
Government
of
Are you still
regulation,
opposed?
now that
Government
we've
regulation.
Gary, are
clarified,
you still opposed based on what Dario explained just now about what the Tanzania model and the
Government
council?
general.
why
You
couldn't
still
we,
opposed?
why couldn't we have
think
a
it's-
model
This
like
is-
this?
It hasn't worked.
In
It, hasn't-
Tanzania?
it hasn't proven, the Tanzania experience hasn't proven itself as yet.
Gary,
In
no,
other countries-
Gary, you haven't
hold
been
on.
following
In
it.
other
The
countries,
Gary.
If
Gary,
I
you
were to
suggesting
that
but
something
if
like
I
that?
were
No.
to,
I could show you many
if I were
successes in the Tanzania model.
if I were to support Gary's argument, I would support Gary's
That
argument.
we do nothing.
From the no, not that we do nothing. From the perspective is that we may not necessarily be doing the right thing to perhaps try to emulate the Tanzania model in Guyana, because you have to look at the Tanzania context
Exactly.
and juxtapose it against the Guyana
Dynamic.
context.
Exactly.
And we don't have the maturity necessarily in the Guyana context to
I was
emulate
just
what happens in the
asking, what
Tanzania
is the
context.
Guyanese
That's not necessarily so
But-
much.
So then
because
what is the Guyanese context?
If you have state regulation, I know of the private media because I've worked in private media houses, that they're in mortal fear that if they have an infraction, their license will be taken away. I've seen that happen to CNS Sharma, where there was an infraction.
No one license has ever been taken away in the middle.
And
We
it
need to
was
correct our
suspended. I'm saying
but in
there
any
was
case, there
more-
will be
I
I
penalties.
said there. I didn't say that they were.
In any form of regulation.
I said they are in mortal fear that their licenses will be taken away. I said that.
But in
I
any
did not
form
say
of
that.
regulation,
it
you will have
implies that
penalties.
it's
No,
a
that's
separate
not like that.
responsibility.
I'm saying that because of an infringement, Sharma was suspended. Y'all did not allow me to finish, gentlemen.
I heard that.
Y'all act as gentlemen. Act
heard
as
that.
gentlemen. We're having a civilized discussion.
We'll be-
So then
That-
tell
that
us,
is
tell us,
civilized
Namila,
so far.
Namila,
And so far it
Namila,
is.
take us into the Guyanese context with regards to the media and tell us why a model like this shouldn't be pursued.
For one, look at the politics in Guyana, and the media sets the agenda for politics in any country. The media is the agenda setter in any country, in any democracy, right? The politics of Guyana is polarized. It's either them and us or us and them. That's given, right?
And it's getting worse.
Okay, I don't know if it's getting worse.
In
'cause
terms of the polarization.
I'm not sure, because I think I have been working with other people, even though people have fixed ideas on who is on that. I am not like that. I work for the greater good. I've always worked for the greater good. And that's why I'm in journalism, because I hate injustices. For me, if we sit on our high horses and said, oh, we were employed by the government media, we were employed by the private media, then we have this agenda and we have that agenda, we'll get nowhere. The thing is, if we work for the greater good, the public has to have information that will allow them to make informed choices. Then they have to have competing media houses, whether private or government.
So you really believe that greater good will be
I
well
might
served?
be inclined-
Will be well served when you have a situation in the
Allow me
media
to finish,
landscape
go on.
where proprietors dictate the agenda based on their own personal grievances and all.
Like the
I do
Kaieteur
not
news.
agree with. I do not agree
Like
with
the
that.
Kaieteur
You
news.
don't
I
be-
would not
you don't
agree
believe
with
that that's happening?
I would not agree with anybody using their medium, because
Oh.
I've seen it. I've seen it in the Chronicle. I've seen it in the Kaieteur News. I've seen it in the Guyana Times.
Well, that's
All
where
are
we are.
guilty.
Well, Namila,
So
we
all
agree.
are
Exactly.
guilty.
So
good.
all are guilty.
Well,
So
good. We-
should it then
There
go
are no
unabated?
sacred cows.
Okay.
Should it
There are no
then-
sacred cows.
Should that
That's my
situation
whole point.
then go
I am a
unabated?
journalist
That's
by
the point.
profession.
What's the way forward?
Right.
Should that
The way forward.
situation
Let's
go
examine the way forward.
unabated?
I'm saying that we all have to have civilized conversation with media proprietors, whether it's government, whether it's private media, and come up among themselves, which I think they have, on, like you say, a model that would have the body, not government regulation, sanction whether it's state or private media, without having innuendos and cheap shots taken at anybody. We should have a civilized discussion. When we get to the stage where we can agree to disagree without rancor,
That is when we'll
that
move
is when
forward.
we move
Well,
forward.
that's
When
where
we get to
are.
the stage.
Well,
And you don't
When
believe that
we
could
can-
happen in this climate?
Dario, we
I
have,
think because,
we
look,
have
all
had
the media
civilized
colleagues,
discussions.
I worked in the private media,
No, but I
and
think
I
we
can
first
assure
have
you,
to accept that in the Guyana context,
The
yes, we're in a
polemics.
bad,
Yes.
But that's what I'm trying to
but-
get.
but-
Are we agreed
And it is,
Okay,
that
and
we're
it is
at a stage where there's need for curbing lest it spirals
But-
to a point of no return?
Gary said we're in a bad situation, and it is in that context Gary is still proposing that we have self-regulation.
regulation.
No.
Listen, finish, please.
Yes,
that
we are in a bad situation.
We're
but
saying
when we
therefore, we're saying
impose
therefore
state
that the
regulation
media
on the
has a
media,
but you keep
responsibility
harping
to
about
ensure
state.
social
But
implosion.
why are you keep harping about state? No, Mrs. Rowe herself just outlined, just outlined a model that could be pursued with journalists getting together, civilized discussion, even though she kept the pen seemingly as a weapon pointing to my end.
I would
But
not
at the
ever
end of the day,
resort to violence.
at the end of the
No,
day,
she's a
we
lady,
have
Kwame.
a model. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just giving fact. At the end of the day, we have models here that are being proposed, right? And it is on this basis, based on what we say today is the Wild West media, the media of rancor in Guyana, the media of character assassination in Guyana, that we are proposing that something has to be done. And none of what she just mentioned contains state regulation. It contains a model, a regulatory body model, except the state being involved and controlling that process. So why is it, and from the beginning of the talk about regulations, none of us, at least not for me, except Michael and, Gary and my friend next to me here, spoke about state. And that's why I mentioned just now about this fixation about the state.
What do you
Because
propose,
I am proposing a regulatory body such as the Tanzania model.
appointed by whom?
Well, the media
Could
coming together
the media-
themselves and being able to agree on a body, a model that can take us forward, such as the example of the
a Guyana
Tanzania.
Press Association.
Well,
and
whatever we
Guyana
have
Media
now is not
Proprietary
working.
Association.
Whatever we have is not working.
Hold on.
And
We-
Gary,
whatever we have is
there's
not
an
working.
independent media
Gary,
workers association
right?
of Ghana, which you've deliberately excluded.
Gary.
is
We're
not
we're
working.
not talking about a body that looks out for the interests of one set
few people.
of media practitioners. We are talking about a regulatory body that the media fraternity itself can establish to regulate itself. The Tanzanian model is one model. Research could be done. We could look at best practices all across the world to determine what will work for our context. That's why I'm suggesting that it is believed by many that the state of the Guyanese media is at a crossroads, if it hasn't already crossed that road to the point of no return. It is rancorous, it is libelous, it is
Outside of
very distasteful.
outside of libelous, that is what a free press is.
Democracy.
But
no,
That is democracy.
press
Yeah,
is-
but we're not
no,
denying
no.
that.
The
We're not
democracy
denying
at
within
play.
the context
But
of the freedom of the
free
press.
press with
But-
maturity.
and also
Within the
a free
How are we
press,
going to get
a
there
free
if we can't
press.
sit down and
Listen,
have a civil discussion,
there is not
Michael?
absolutely.
How are we
there
going to
is
have
no.
that?
All right, it's a
Absoluteness.
very important point.
It is
you
not
made.
no absoluteness when it comes to freedom. And that's what we need to get to.
Namila
And
made-
where is the accountability?
Freedom
Who
has
sanctions?
responsibility.
But that's the point I'm making.
Who sanctioned the wave
With the
or the campaign or the onslaught on individuals and officials, etc., to say and to pull people in line to say that this is not journalistic ethics, this is not what it ought to be,
At the
and
moment,
that's what
nobody.
we're talking about, accountability. The media seem to believe, sections of the media seem to believe, that they're a law unto themselves. That they could slander, wake up the next morning and slander somebody. The next day, they could decide if they don't like X or they don't like Y, they could go after him or her character.
but
That's why
Kwame,
we have
you
the
know,
courts,
it is
Kwame.
pervasive.
That's why we have
No,
the
no.
courts.
I don't
That's why
agree.
we have the
Kwame,
courts.
I don't
But
agree.
that
That
situation-
was-
Rights on the
That's an
law.
abuse. No.
Well,
I
a
think
point
that's a
of
misuse
order,
the
point of
courts.
order. That
is the people's
situation
democratic
with the
right.
way the media is operating is pervasive across the media spectrum.
Thank you, Dario.
Stronger
Thank
in
you.
some sections than in others, and that's debatable. But it is now a situation in the minds of many where the entire media spectrum is now to a point at a crossroads and ought to do some introspection.
Permit
We
me.
cannot, to my mind, in our maturity and in our democracy, decide that each man onto his own, regulate yourself and allow the viewers to determine. That seems to be nonsensical to me.
No, but the public at the end of the day, it's your harshest judge because you're in it for a business.
And at what point do you allow the public to inform you of what you're doing?
Remember, the
When you
information
already-
is for the public. The information that you gather and you disseminate, it's for the
But
public.
tell me how that is supposed to work.
Okay.
For the
it's
public to
supposed
tell
work.
you
The
that
public
you're
don't-
going beyond
the
What's
public
the
don't-
your
feedback
responsibility.
mechanism?
How is that
We do not have the mechanism
And is that
here.
a practical approach?
Especially in the electronic media, you might have in the print media circulation. In electronic media, we don't have the mechanism here that would say, okay, we have so many viewers at this point. I don't know if we have it now.
The University of Ghana would have conducted studies, I think, in some 3 years ago to this
Okay.
effect. So there is data to that effect.
Okay. And it would be instrumental, Kwame, for you to know that in all my years working in the media, private media, the state media, I have colleagues there. We have never had, and even if I wanted information or footage from the state media, I always
All of
ask
us
for
have
it
friends
and got
across
it. No,
the
no, no,
board.
no.
Adam
I'm saying
Harris is my
as a professional,
good friend.
that's how I
respect him,
operate.
I look up to him.
Gary,
That's the point I'm making.
We have a few minutes remaining, and I'm hoping that we can really come up with something substantive in terms of an approach for the way forward. This is the last in this series. Okay. And certainly I wouldn't want to end this discussion with the question still up in the air as to whether there is need for regulation or not. Maybe that will be the end result of these discussions. But certainly we want to have a definitive view. Gary is positing that the media ought to regulate itself and let the viewers and readers decide. I don't understand how that is supposed to work. I would love to see a kind of a practical model as to how that is supposed to work.
That is how democracy operates.
Namila, you were saying let the democracy work and let it sort itself out.
Democracy.
No, I'm not saying that it would work and sort itself out. I am saying this is a fledgling democracy, albeit. Can we, on both sides of the divide, the private and state media?
So you're conceding that there is a divide?
Of course, of course.
Way forward.
It is there. Can we have a civilized discussion without innuendos, without casting blame anywhere? Let's start and say, okay, we're in a bad state. I'm not going to blame you, I'm not going to blame me. Because at the end of the day, this is our profession. And Michael is a profession, Gary is a profession, I'm a profession, Kwame is a profession. We all speak from different sides of the divide, and we all speak to our interests depending on where we work, right?
No, I speak depending on how I see it.
Okay, you see that. Okay, well, I could say the same for me. My thing is, at the end of the day, can we have a civilized discussion and say, listen, we don't want government regulation. We do not want that. That's not for democracy, because government regulation is tantamount to censorship.
Of course.
We do not want censorship. Who decides then what is good for the goose and good for the gander too, right? Unless we come together, this is a small country. This spectrum is even small. It's not infinite. We can come together, sit and discuss, because as I'm saying, once we come like matured people, get to the table and say, this is for Guyana, this is not for me or he or she or which party or which media house. This is for Guyana. We need an informed and educated population where we're going to entertain them, we're going to inform them. Then I think that can be a way forward. Not when we always pointing fingers. And like I'm at pains to point out to Kwame, in all my years as a media profession, I don't care which media house you work at, I've always treated you with respect, and I will continue because I treat you as a professional. I will not say you work at the state media. Oh, well, even if I see your work and I disagree with some of it, I will still treat you with respect because it's your profession.
Okay, Gary, way forward.
I think we're firstly underestimating Guyanese to make an informed choice. I will not share from the position that we should regulate ourselves.
When you say make an informed choice, so in other words, the Guyanese readership and viewership must decide who the responsible media houses, yes, and then their support towards, and what happened, what is to be come of the ones who are being unprofessional and irresponsible.
They will die a timely death.
At the expense of what?
Of themselves.
By which time?
No.
By which time, Dario?
Certainly, Gary, you don't believe that there wouldn't be implications for the wider society.
By which time a significant portion of the
continue
society
to
would
operate.
be jaundiced.
You know,
we're
that doesn't make sense.
Saying to ourselves that the Guyanese society is so, I'm not sure what is the nice word to
But
use.
is that approach working anywhere? To your knowledge?
Across the world we're talking about? We're talking about Guyana. We can.
We
should.
But
Let's
the
look.
approach
No.
working here?
I mean,
Yes, it does work.
Yeah?
it works.
Because we
where
have
the
information from
public
all
determines.
over. We have information from all over.
We as media practitioners reach outside of Guyana for information. Let's just say regional or world news. We decide based on what we would have been reading, what we would have been presented with, which information we decide is credible.
To disseminate,
Because of what
definitely.
they would have been putting out.
That's how.
And in
That's
the same- in the same
that's how
way.
credibility
But-
is determined.
But I don't know that you can have credibility on that
I-
basis.
I thought the
Listen.
standards still
BBC,
exist in
okay.
journalism, where credibility is determined by facts. Are
That's
you
it,
now
Dario.
suggesting
And
that
period.
based on the
No,
way the media is
no
now
debate.
operating,
That's
with
it.
freedom of
That's
information,
journalism.
access to information on the World Wide Web and so on, that credibility is now determined by
the
what is out
subjectivity.
there?
He said,
By
but media
subjectivity.
What's
houses.
available
That's
out
not what
there?
he said, Dario.
Right?
What?
He
You're taking
said,
it out of context.
Clarify for me.
explain to
I'm
him. He
saying-
said, we as media,
We as media practitioners, when we reach for international news to relate to our readers, we will take information based on what
On a
they
credible
would have been
source.
presenting
like
over
BBC.
time.
BBC would be known
Yes,
as a credible source.
exactly.
That's
Yeah,
one
but-
example.
and was
Because
it-
they
what's the
would have
basis then?
established
Example.
that.
Oh, is that the same basis for how you derive your local information and news?
I don't follow.
You're saying that's how you get your credibility in what you publish with regards to international news. How do you derive your local news?
How do I derive
Based
local-
on what is popular at the time, what is being spoken of, what's being
News,
speculated
no.
about.
News determines itself.
Dario, let me just
don't-
get in here.
Let-
As an
Okay,
editor,
Gary
I
could
had
do
some
with the
young
help. Gary could do with
reporters,
the help.
right?
Let's hear them out.
And I've always, and any one of them can verify this. If you do not get the other side of the story, I'm not carrying the story.
That still
If
stands
the
as a
person
principle of journalism.
refuses to respond to what you were saying, I put at the bottom of that newscast, if you refuse, no comment. If the efforts to reach you, because and I am saying this without any fear of such contradiction. When you call from certain media houses, maybe a few ministers would respond to you. For example, Rob Prasad, Dr. Ramsamy at Health and so. There's no forthcoming.
Agriculture.
Yes,
We've
no
got to wrap it up
forthcoming.
now. I've gotten
But
the signal
let me
from the
just-
producers that we have to wrap it up. And I would want us to wrap it up on the note of where we go from here. I think we just had quite a few words from yourself, Namila, and Gary on the way forward. Michael, way forward, and we're gonna leave Kwame for last because we have to get the tightest song bite from Kwame.
Yeah, so I'll take as much time as I possibly can. Okay, my idea of the way forward, and Namila hinted at it. We have to start the conversation, and I'm offering
I would think that this is a good start of
yeah,
the conversation.
this is a good start, but I'm also offering now the facilities of NCN. Let's come here on March 15 at 10 hours and start the conversation. All who want to see the media develop. That's the first point in terms of the way forward. In addition to that, censorship has to be it has to first start with self-censorship. And when I speak of self-censorship, it's not NCN regulating NCN. The media fraternity must come up with a menu, a model. For example, something akin to the Tanzania model, but it has to be done in the Guyana context, where that body will have some oversight and regulate what the media does as a fraternity and how we ensure our responsibilities to the society, which is of paramount. However, for that to happen in a functional democracy, I'm firmly of the view too that there has to be an enabling legislative environment for that to be effective.
Most certainly. Kwame?
Yes, certainly I think this is a very good start. And I believe this discussion has been civilized. Civilized discussion doesn't mean there must be the absence of truthfulness, I must say.
Innuendos,
What I
not-
want
not
to say
necessary.
at the end of the day, that we need to ensure that we have some kind of regulatory body to stop this madness, to stop this Wild West media operation that we have in Guyana. And we know the examples. We've been going on about it all along, over and over.
And I want you
This
to be clear,
all-
because when people hear you as Kwame Mc Coy posit regulation, they think media control.
Well,
So
I-
please be clear.
Government.
Well, I
Because
don't
Yeah,
think...
government
liaison.
control. I mean.
We have
Government
had
control.
we have had a history in this country. The PPP Civic Administration has had a history in this country of freeing up media, liberalizing the media in this country. There's been no attempt ever to control media freedoms in this country by the PPP Civic Administration. And I don't think after 20 years it will attempt to do so.
Not even with
when I regulate,
Not even
when
with
I talk about
advertisements.
regulations, when I talk about regulations of the media, I am talking as to the very many models out there, with the exception of government control, to have the media regulated among themselves, the fraternity, and to ensure that we have a better situation. I always use the example of the standards that we are going to be leaving behind us, the young people that have to emulate us in the media, etc. And so that is why it is very important. When we talk about public interest and we talk about people are going to be our judge, I think to some extent. But what about the damages that would have been done to the psyche of our people based on what is reported in the media, the misinformation, the character assassination, etc. And that is what we need to curb before it is too late. When we talk about taxpayers' dollars, the private media utilizes taxpayers' dollar. Every person that advertises in the private or public media, the public and private media utilize taxpayers' money. And therefore, they all have the similar responsibility to serve the interests of the public. And so it is not left up to just one people, the state media. The state media doesn't only report on the government, it reports on national issues.
We have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your contributions. We've had with us Kwame Mc Coy, Information Liaison to the President, Miss Rowe, Namila Baynes-Rowe, and of course we've had Gary Eleazar, who is one of our online, pioneering online journalists. That's a new...
I think Dennis would be offended if by you saying that.
I said one of. One of.
There could only be one.
We've had Michael Gordon, CEO, acting of NCN, and we have been with you for the past hour discussing the way forward with the Guyanese media fraternity. The Reporters Without Border has dropped Guyana 11 places on the Press Freedom Index. We've looked at their criteria, we've looked at the fairness of the report, we've looked at the media in Guyana and how it's operating, and whether there is need for regulation. The discussion has started. The dice has been rolled, I believe, as Namila has suggested. Civilized discussion can now develop and take root towards the curbing of what seems to be the point of no return in the media of Guyana. I've been your moderator, Dario Mc Almont. Thank you very much for having joined us for the past 3 sessions and hoping that you will join us for future discussions.